Shock Piece: The Search for Freedom. A novel by C. Nguyen. Chapter 25. Mike, the Amerasian Kid. Today was his lucky day. It was bright and sunny. And look, wow, Mike exclaimed softly. The boy was excited. There were so many cigarette butts and tin bottle caps scattered haphazardly on the ground in the vicinity of the bars. They were his bonus income. Last night must have been a busy night for the sisters. It was no doubt that the party comrades had one hell of an enjoyable time with their pocket money, Mike thought. The fag ends and tin bottle caps were littered on the cement ground in greater numbers than on previous days. Some cigarettes were hardly smoked at all, with a good bit still left on the ends. "That's extravagant," Mike muttered, shaking his head in disapproval. Those guys must have been in such a hell of a hurry to get in or get out of here that they had extinguished their smoke prematurely, Mike thought and chuckled to himself. His young mind strayed to the images of coupling between the sisters and the comrades in the dark corners of the street bars. That made his whole body tingle, as if thousands of ants were crawling on his skin. With the curiosity and rising testosterone of a growing boy, Mike used to peek through the flimsy curtain when the action was in full swing. He was always eager to approach the makeshift tents when the grunting noises and sounds of bodies thudding against each other in the limited space could be heard from afar. Only 2 nights ago, Mike had poked his head into the tiny cubicle to see the back of a kneeling man, his head bobbing up and down in his ecstasy, panting and whispering, "Oh, honeypot, sweet heaven, I love you, baby." In the small tent, the prostitute was perching dangerously on a rickety bench, her knees wide apart and her musty odor filling the enclosed space as the humid tropical evening increased its intensity. She looked up as though on cue when the curtain was drawn apart and opened her mouth in astonishment when she recognized the Amerasian boy. Glaring at him, she shooed Mike away, silently mouthing the words, "Get out of here, cheeky bastard." Then she closed her eyes again and went back to her chore. It was one of her best nights. This man was particularly fond of her, and thankfully he was gentle with her. The other clients were usually very rough and demanding. Their carnal language could range from a gentle coaxing to extreme vulgarity. "Oh, fuck it, open your legs wider, stupid bitch. What are you waiting for? I don't have time to stand here and wait. Hurry up. Heave your big ass up so I can get to you, silly tramp." What a life. She often tried to shun her thoughts when dealing with crude and foul-mouthed clients, obeying their demands perfunctorily and getting on with it as quickly as she could. Sometimes she still flinched with the rawness of it all. Even now, it was already 2 years since she first began her trade. Although she had thought it impossible from the start, her shyness and dignity had rapidly worn thin. But of course, a veteran's wife had no life in the new communist world, and she had no choice. It was a lazy way to explain it, she knew. They always said there were other choices, like becoming a comrade's mistress, she thought amusedly. Perhaps that was better, ignoring a jailed husband in re-education camps and burying the past to get on with a new beginning. But this was going to pass, she often reassured herself. There were always buts in any situation, and she had to believe in them, the buts and ifs of life. She was going to regain her dignity and to become a wife again if her husband was released from the re-education camp. It should not be too long. How she wished that he were here now to help her bear the burden of life. But she knew that he was bearing a different ordeal that was 1,000 times harder in his re-education camp. She could not compare. Other times she just closed her eyes, her mind drifting out of the tiny cubicle, and thought of her children and their dinners, praying that they would never question her source of income. Then the man stood up abruptly, breaking her line of thought. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand before unzipping his fly hastily and thrusting himself roughly into her. He shuddered and went limp in a fraction of a minute, panting heavily. It was over before it even started. She wished it were longer. She had almost gotten there. With a twinge of shame, the prostitute felt herself regretting the short-lived copulation. She thought she could have had a day at least. Oh, the irony of it all. The normal physiological needs of a woman. She wanted to shout it out. She needed to be loved and to love. They did not even allow her that when visiting her husband in jail. She wanted to be a woman, to be feminine again so much. It was so hard. Life was cruel. Tonight, she pondered why she was more emotional than usual. It must be the moon, she thought. It had brought out the loneliness in her. She wanted to cry, but she fought it down and put on a waxy smile as the man zipped up his pants before pushing a 2 dong note into her hands as he departed. In 1978, an average monthly salary for a blue-collar worker was around 25 dong, and for a white-collar worker or professional, 35 dong, barely adequate for life's necessities. With enough clients, a prostitute could earn 50 dong a month and afford to feed her family as well as saving for a monthly visit to her husband in his re-education camp. The woman stood up and pulled her dress down. She reached for her panties and slipped them on, then went out to wait for the next customer, dropping a 50 shu into Sue's box on her way, a share fee for the boss. Shu was the cent monetary value in Vietnam, as the dong was to the dollar. Mike's miniature penis perked up and hardened involuntarily by what he had seen. The boy was amused and tried to push it down with his hands, but it was stubborn and stayed erect. This erotic glimpse with its suggestive movements and language were more than sufficient for his tingling sensation to last a good half-hour into the night. Back then, long before the digital revolution occurred and pornography was still a subject out of reach of young boys like him, sex was a mystery. Many young boys and girls did not even have a chance to understand the changing phases of puberty, and the subject of sexuality was heavily taboo in society. Information was hard to get, and for a poor street kid like Mike, it was impossible. He had no chance to get his hands on books or magazines. Those were luxuries beyond his reach. This free feast was a real bonus to the growing teenager. His fascination with the penis heightened his curiosity. The boy looked for opportunities to rekindle that erection during his rounds in the evening with the street bar women. Alternatively, just to listen to the whispering was enough to get his young mind racing, and just by thinking of it, his skin instantly prickled with goosebumps on his arms and legs. Perhaps it was his mixed American blood. Mike often wondered if his arousal was unusually early for his age or if it was normal. Was he an alien as they often teased him? He had no way of knowing. He was on his own, a poor and neglected Amerasian kid in a communist world. His mind drifted away from the dirty reminiscence and back to his piles of cigarette butts. Mike hoped Uncle Ba would give him a fair amount of cash for these. Uncle Ba had a tiny glass cabinet sitting on an obscure spot on the pavement selling loose cigarettes. Back then, common people could only afford to purchase a single cigarette at a time. Those who had even less money would get recycled tobacco, which was collected from the half-smoked butts. Ba would amass the leftover tobacco leaves from those discarded butts, then hand-roll them into clumsy, coarse cigarettes with week-old, recycled newspaper. The crispy yellowish paper that seemed to belong to the last century came in very handy. The tobacco-addicted blue-collar laborers were his main customers. They had no choice. Pall Mall, 555, Winfield, or any brand name tobacco was practically out of their reach. Even any of the local products was still too costly for them, with daily incomes of barely 1 dong a day for a meal or two for themselves and their families. Little kids like Mike kept Ba's business sustainable. Mike was glad with his pickings today. He could think of a nice, scrumptious dinner tonight. A dish of broken rice and a piece of succulent barbecue pork rib for a change after all. He would bite into the crunchy skin and savor the sweet, greasy taste of fat, which was rare to come by to feed his growing body. His good old nanny could only give him a corner in her kitchen to sleep at night, the size of a single mat, but nothing else. The thin mat made with a certain palm leaf woven in intricate and distinctive homely patterns was dear to him, and he kept it closely with him as the single possession reminding him of his mother. He was very careful with it and afraid of any wear and tear he might cause. It had been more than 3 years, and his mother's face was now only a dim picture. He wished that he could refresh the image of her face somehow. Mike had forgotten much of her features, as his memories of her came primarily from his heart. He was very young when she left him, and there were no photos or anything from her personal effects for Mike to keep. There was nothing except that thin palm mat where the two of them used to lay together for an afternoon nap when he was a little boy. Every morning he rolled it up ever so carefully, tying it tightly in a bundle and hiding it in a corner, making space for the tiny kitchen. He was no longer a little boy, and Mike noticed that he was growing up fast. His body was bulging out in many places. It was only last month that he used to have his shower with other kids his age at the communal water pump a few streets down in District 3, completely naked and free of any pretended dignity. They stood under the spray of the pump, plainly in public view, and happily scrubbed away without any shame or shyness, as if in total privacy of their own bathroom. He used to enjoy his time at the communal water pump when the kids were friendly to him, splashing water over each other in childish games. But that was then. Now Mike had a few hairs sprouting down there, and he refused to join other boys anymore to have showers at that communal pump. He waited until late at night after returning home from Sue's bar. Growing up as an orphan was lonesome. Mike had trained his mind to stay neutral about any attachment he felt for anybody, including his feeling for Sue, even though he was grateful for her generosity towards him. He was afraid of being left alone again, and he tried to look at Sue only as his employer. His pay from her was for his expenses. Small as it was, it gave him more choices in his daily life. Meals were his main concern, and it was only luck if he had enough to eat, day by day. If he could get a small boiled sweet potato or a piece of cassava or a handful of sticky rice with palm sugar and peanuts for breakfast, it was lucky for him. The last choice was only possible if he had a bit of extra cash. His typical lunch was just plain congee and half of a salty boiled egg, and dinner was what was left over from the meals of Sue's customers. His regular feast for a while was boiled rice and gravy without the meat itself. He used to wish he could have a thin slice of that roast pork on display to remind himself of a forgotten taste. Plain and simple meals were cheapest, and that was all he could afford after his daily pay from Sue for helping her around the place as a general busboy. His scavenging of cigarette butts and tin bottle caps served as an extra income for an occasional luxury, like a taste of real meat or an occasional ice block. After every 3 or 4 days, if he collected a substantial amount, he would bring them to Uncle Bar to exchange for cash. There were other poor kids in it as well. Like him, they were scavengers, joining to form gangs on the streets to protect their own interests. Mike was a loner, as his Amerasian appearance made him an outcast among the Vietnamese boys. However, he was territorial and had fought strongly for his ground. What belonged to Mike started from Sue's bar and extended in a 100-meter radius in both directions. The other kids were not bold enough to fight Mike, even if they joined forces. He had the fierce determination of a real fighter when it came to his chief interests. Today, Mike was wearing cotton board shorts with an elastic waistband, old and grubby, even a size bigger than his already large body. They were grey and charcoal checked. His feet were bare, his toenails were blackened with dirt and grime, and the heels were thickened and cracked with deep lines. His upper torso was also bare. The pale skin was pinkish from prolonged exposure to the sun, but stubbornly refused to tan. There were freckles on his pink cheeks, and the golden locks had changed to wavy sun-streaked light brown. His hair was shoulder length, not from choice, but from infrequent cutting. His eyes were still blue, but a shade lighter, not as deep as before. Mike suddenly noticed a boy busy picking up the goods in his territory. He yelled, "Hey, fuck off, go away or I'll smash your skull, scumbag. Those are mine, shithead. Don't you know, stupid idiot?" "Fuck you, American trash asshole," the boy shot back, still holding a handful of tin bottle caps. Stuffing them hurriedly into his satchel, he darted away. He stopped after a fair distance and poked out his tongue at Mike, taunting him and mouthing the words, "Your mother's an American whore." Mike dashed up, his right hand forming into a tight fist. He chased after the kid for a short while as a warning, then returned to protect his territory. Forget it. He could not waste more time than necessary. His time was more valuable than that, and besides, Mike got used to the insults, becoming immune to them over the years. He had been called nastier names, and they did not make him wince or tear his heart out anymore. His stomach was more important, he realized. Sometimes he would show them his American cowboy blood by daring them to a kickboxing fight that used fists, elbows, knees, shins, and feet in a full contact combat. The boys, ranging from 12 down to 6 or 7 years old, would gather around the cement footpath after school and divide into two groups, one on Mike's side and one on his opponent's. Each boy bet 5 sous on the winner. Whoever won received the whole lot, and the winner would shout the group to some sort of treat. At first, Mike always won. His ego and his eagerness to show off his power gave him strength and energy. Eventually, the boys refused to bet on the other party anymore, but solely on Mike. Mike learnt that he had to pretend to lose now, and then to lure them into betting. And so he prearranged with his opponents to let them win and share half of what he collected. The kids enjoyed the games, and Mike enjoyed showing off his boxing skill as well as having some extra cash to pay for his luxuries. An ice-cold lime sorbet after the game with the kids was the highlight of his day. "Come on, American trash boy, you can do it," the boys on his side all shouted excitedly. The other boys' team was equally rowdy. "Short to him, kin. Don't let the son of an American's whore beat you." Then they all laughed uproariously, clapping their hands with the excitement. Kin was sweating. He was 4 years older than Mike and was of the same build. He had tried to land a few punches on Mike's left shoulder repeatedly, but the boy ducked away expertly on the second attempt, retaliating with a nasty left-handed elbow jerk to his chin. Gun yelled out in pain, "Fuck it, you nasty bastard. I'll get you for that." He snarled at Mike, one hand still holding onto his bruised chin. Mike laughed sarcastically. His practiced maneuver had paid off at last. That should teach the bastard for trying to punch him real hard in the first place. Even though they had already made a pact before, they were supposed to play act, with Mike agreeing to let Kin win this time. The older boy had promised to play soft, cheating swine. Mike strutted in a circle, exhibiting a cheeky arrogance. "Yeah, motherfucker, come and get me if you can." Standing in the outer circle, the other kids laughed and cheered. They always enjoyed the fight as Mike was becoming more adept with his moves. His kicks, punches, elbows, and blocks were so natural that it was as if he was a born fighter. The two boys eyed each other and Mike nodded his head. He knew that Gun was already tiring and wanted out. That was the signal. Mike danced on his feet again. He wanted to show off his kick to the crowd before a prearranged knockout. Gun came closer. His breathing was labored, and the pain on his chin was worsening. The American bastard must have cracked a bone. Gun was furious. In his hand was a sharp stone that he had concealed in the pocket of his shorts, a strategy that Gun had planned in case Mike failed to let him win. The older boy was tired of Mike's strength. The two boys slowly moved closer, cheered on by the spectators. "Yeah, go for it, Mike. Hit him hard, Gun. Don't let the shithead win again." Gun dashed out with his backhanded punch this time. Mike had seen that coming and could have avoided it easily, but he pretended not to so that Gun would have his revenge. Unexpectedly, the sharp stone tore into his right cheek and opened up a gash. At once, bright red blood started flowing through the wound. Mike was surprised by the pain. He swore, "Oh fuck, cheating bastard." He staggered backward. The pain was not anticipated. While it angered him, it boosted his resolve, giving him a surge of energy. He stood up immediately. However, Gin did not let Mike regain his stance and pounded him twice more on the skull with the sharp stone, using all his strength. The Amerasian boy was defenseless. More blood spurted out, dripping down onto his bare upper body. Gin was incensed with rage, as if the sight of blood stimulated his adrenaline. He slammed Mike into the ground, whacking him a few more blows before standing up triumphantly. This time it was he who strutted around proudly like a peacock. Mike did not move. His pitiful body slumped into a fetal position. He lost consciousness shortly afterward. Gin must have hit him hard when he fell to the ground. The other kids were silent now as they realized they were witnessing a real bloody fight, and some younger boys had actually run home, terrified by the sight of injuries. Some stayed back and cheered on. We won! We won! Then they all left the scene laughing and happy with the loot, and with no concern for the wounded boy. Mike lay there in a heap not far from his nanny's place. He did not know how long he had been unconscious, but he awoke slowly with a familiar voice in his ears. Sue shook Mike lightly by his shoulders, her voice heavy with concern. My goodness, Mike, what on earth happened to you, son? She patted his forehead and felt his warmth and was relieved that the boy was still alive. His bloodied head caked with dark red stains frightened her. The street was dark now. In line with the power-saving scheme from the new communist government, many streets in Saigon were pitch dark without any lights in the evening, and that made it even more favorable for the open street bar trade. Mike was dazed. He could not get up. The wounds to his skull must have bled a fair bit, and the metallic rusty smell of dry blood filled the air. His cheek was tender and swollen. Mike put his hand over it, and he could feel the deep laceration there. Fuck it, fucking son of a bitch, Mike swore under his breath. He did not want Sue to hear. He replied, I had a fight and fell to the ground. Nothing to worry about, sis. I'm okay. Mike tried once more to get up, but he was hit by extreme nausea and dizziness and had to lie down again. He reassured Sue, I'll be okay. You'd better start opening your business soon, sis. I'll join you in a few minutes. Sue looked at Mike, her eyes filled with tenderness toward a good kid who had had a poor start in life. She knew he was wounded and might not be fit to work tonight, but she had no choice. She agreed finally. Okay, Mike, you get up when you can, boy. Mike knew that he had to report to Sue as soon as her bar opened. He usually helped her time the men in between visits to the copulation cubicle and counting the beers. The men had to consume a certain amount of beer per hour to give Sue her profit. Mike just had to bring out more beer and clear away the empty or half-empty bottles to keep the cash flowing in. He had to tally the bills and collect the payments. Mike was smarter than most kids his age. Perhaps that was nature's way, the law of survival in the human jungle. The harder the life, the smarter or wiser a person becomes. Mike would have to survive his ordeals like the rest of the population of South Vietnam in those years.